So there's like schools and centers which were largely closed for 2020, which makes sense. But I realized there was this modality of childcare called family childcare. That's actually the largest supply of childcare to communities of color, to all children under 3, to children who have access needs, and to kids in communities that receive a low income. Like, this is the largest supply of childcare. This is like the backbone of the childcare system. And it's largely disaggregated. It's like 6,000 small businesses. Think about as many bodegas as there are, the one bodega doesn't necessarily know the next bodega, And so I just called all of them and started asking them about if they were open. Over 2/3 of family childcare programs remained open, did not close a single day through lockdown to support the families in their community. They're providing 3 hot meals. They're providing educational activities. They're providing PPE to the family, in addition to just ensuring that cashiers, delivery people, mail people, all of the people involved in the medical system that we were relying on could go to work.
Welcome to episode 74 of People Are the Answer. I truly believe that people are the only answer to the world's many problems. I'm Jeffrey M. Zucker, a serial entrepreneur here to learn how innovators are creating outsized, transformational social impact and to shine a light on all the good happening in a world often hyper-focused on the negative. Today's episode features Jaime-Jin Lewis, founder of Wiggle Room, where they're working to make childcare as accessible as possible, beginning in New York City. Jaime-Jin won the 2021 David Prize, a celebration of individuals and ideas to create a better, brighter New York City. The prize honors those with the grit and vision to change our communities, our culture, and our future for good. She's also been named one of the most 100 influential people in care. Jaime-Jin and I discussed her being born in South Korea and growing up in the southern U.S. with a mom who was an early childhood educator, how work in the hospitality industry helped build a foundation for her career, her years in Buenos Aires, getting engaged in impact in New York City, and eventually founding Wiggle Room, and much more. Here is Jaime-Jin Lewis on People Are the Answer. Jaime-Jin, thank you so much for joining me on People Are the Answer.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Would love if you could tell us who you are, where you're based, and what your current role is.
Absolutely. So my name is Jaime-Jin Lewis. I was born in Seoul, South Korea. I grew up in the American South, and I'm lucky to call New York City my home for the past 14 years. I am the founder and CEO of a startup in the childcare space called Wiggle Room, where we are reimagining how we do childcare.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to digging into that. In life in general, what would you say motivates you?
I love this question. I would absolutely say, the women who raised me. I work in care and think through both the combination of like skill and brilliance, but also like love and even sacrifice that's required in this industry. And absolutely call on the examples of like my mother, my aunt, my Mimi, who were just really these amazing, like what I would call caregivers in chief, who really invested in me and showed me what was possible. So just thinking through, how to bring that to scale, how to really support these women in our society is absolutely motivating to me every day.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you had some really incredible role models.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned that you were born in Seoul, South Korea. Can you talk about your journey from there to, I believe, Virginia?
Yeah. So this is actually a story I don't typically share, but I'll give you maybe the exclusive. No, it's not that big. But yeah, so I'm an adoptee. I'm one of actually over 200,000 South Korean children that were adopted in the 70s to early 90s from South Korea as a result of a lot of war and political unrest in the country. So I was adopted into a beautiful family, a very loving family. They were living in South Carolina at the time, my mom and dad. And so I've kind of had these like two homes. I've had like where I was born and a biological birth family, as well as an adoptive family that largely raised me here in the United States. So yeah, that was really my journey from here. I was 9 months old, so pretty young. And then was raised in South Carolina until we moved to Virginia, which is where I really lived, I would say 4 years until I actually went to UVA and left when I was about 21.
Nice, got it. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, so yeah, it's cool to hear that you were in South Carolina first, and um, it sounded like you learned a lot in your time in Virginia. I did, was doing a little bit of research and saw that at 15 you were a cashier at Chick-fil-A. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, it was, that was my first job outside of like babysitting or watering the neighbor's plants or cat sitting. Yeah, I worked, I think I was 15. I might have been younger. I'm not sure. But I just remember because I was like a very small child and I might have been like 78 pounds or something like that. And they only had like a men's small size for me to wear of the uniform. And I was in the Chick-fil-A at the Fashion Square Mall in Charlottesville, Virginia. And like just the uniform was so big, the belt actually went around me twice to like hold my pants up. And then like I had to do like, I was on the cashier and I also like packaged the carrot and raisin salads, which I also don't know if they still have. But yeah, it was my first job. And I think it paid like 2.18 an hour.
Oh, wow. Well, I think service and hospitality work is really important to kind of build a foundation in so many ways. So I thought it was cool to see that you did that.
Yeah. I mean, just to piggyback on that, I actually worked in 11 restaurants throughout the first maybe like 10 years of my career. I always had like school and two jobs or work, like my primary job and two jobs. And so the service industry was absolutely a big part of, learning to hustle, customer service, sales, like all of the things that come back. It was probably the greatest teacher to me in my life, if I'm to be honest, was like working all of these service jobs. And when I hire people, I tend to gravitate towards people who've also worked in the service industry because I just think it gives you a training unlike any other, good and bad. I don't try to replicate some of the dynamics there, but I think it really, it instills like a really specific set of skills that are really transferable.
So it sounds like you learned a lot, being in the service industry. But I know also your mother was a big influence on you. She was an early childhood educator. Can you talk about, what she was up to and how that influenced you?
So my mother is like ubiquitously known as Miss Donna in her community. Um, she she actually didn't go to college or get any formal training. She started working at the place where I was going to, like a little community preschool in the basement of our church. And then she's one of those people with a natural gift. She just really loves children. Was able to kind of like learn, what kids need to know at that time. And then over the course of her 30-year career as an educator, she educated over 450 3.5-year-olds, which is, I don't know if you have kids. I don't know if you've been around a 3.5-year-old.
I do.
Okay. It's like, it's
Yeah.
an experience, right? So imagine like 18 of them running around. But it was such a calling for her. And the thing that I think she was specifically gifted in that most women who, and it's usually women, most individuals who are in this industry are really gifted at is like being patient. So teaching patience, modeling patience, like waiting in line for the water fountain is actually like a really hard experience. Sharing your favorite toy is so hard. And she's so good at really guiding young people through that experience, helping them name emotions, helping them name frustration, rage, things like that. And then actually actively participate as a community member. How to say, it's not my turn. How to, like, it's your turn. I want you to have it. How to share. She just did such an amazing job. And in addition to like making like letters and numbers and shapes and colors really fun. And so she started working at the preschool. She started working full time at the preschool. She became such a sought out educator that they actually like expanded her class. So she had like 5 assistant teachers, but
Oh,
and
wow.
like just, another example is like, she's also a musician. And so she plays guitar. And so, oftentimes, when kids are coming in for their first day of school, it may be the first time they've been out, like away from their parent for that long of a time. And so she would like write them their own little personal song as they were coming into the classroom to help with that like really difficult transition period. And like and the kids, you could see them immediately, like all of their fears or anxiety would just kind of like evaporate. And they'd be like, okay, I feel welcome. I belong here. This is another trusted grown up in my community. And she, we joke that like we can't send her to the grocery store because it will take her 2 hours, because on every single aisle, she will see someone that she's taught or a parent, and they'll have to catch up for 20 minutes. And it will take like, multiple hours for her to get in and out just to get a few items, because she's just so known and loved in that community. And so, yeah, that was absolutely part of my influence, seeing that, every day as I was growing up. I didn't always appreciate it as a young person, but as an adult, I'm really, really amazed by what she's been able to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I think even when we're young like that and maybe don't appreciate the things our parents are offering, we're still soaking it up. You still got to be a part of that and see how she was being, and sort of take that into yourself, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, we'll probably get into this in a second, but when, when the pandemic hit, she retired during COVID. And when she retired in 2020, she decided she couldn't go back to school because, she was 70 at the time, and, or maybe a few years before 70, like in her late 60s. And, she would have done this forever, but like she retired and she was just, didn't have traditional benefits, didn't have the perks of what most other industries, when you give 30 years to it, you get retirement, you get benefits, she was CEO level educator, and she was not making CEO level money. And so it was just, that's just part of this nut we're trying to crack at Wiggle Room, is like, like these are the foundational, like members of our society. How do we actually make it work for them? So that part also was very motivating for me.
We definitely need to value our educators better. They're doing such important and difficult work that you have to have the right touch to do well. And it's a shame that it's such a struggle to even make a living in it.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure it was tough. I grew up in the South. I'm sure it was, and I'm Jewish, we're white presenting, like it's not that big of a deal, but it's something. But whereas you growing up of Asian descent in the South, what was that like?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is like most recently been, on the news and on the map for, racial strife. But, it's always been that way. I think I speak very openly and frankly. I love Virginia. I love the South. I love the American South. That's where I'm from. And there's so much work to be done there. Charlottesville has a literal train tracks through the middle of it. And one side is the white side and one side is the black side. It's like all of that land was part of Thomas Jefferson's plantation. And the legacy of enslavement is still very much present there, in the society, the fabric of the society, as well as in the economics. And so I was one of the very, very few Asian kids growing up, in the 80s and 90s in Charlottesville. I would say most adults and educators didn't really have the tools or language. I think, we're coming out of like, there's like the civil rights, and then like, it was really just like, we don't see color, that like this color blindness idea, which while well-intentioned, we know just actually didn't set young people up to have a positive racial identity, to understand what they were part of, and to actually still grapple with the persisting problems of racism. And so my high school today, Charlottesville High School has 2 cafeterias. And when I was going there, I can't speak to how it is today, but when I was going there, it was a black cafeteria and a white cafeteria. And so I literally didn't have a place to sit during lunch. I was like, and I feel like the question always growing up was, are you black or are you white? And there was like one Jewish kid in our class as well. And, it was just such a set binary. And there were like, and there were tracks, most of the white kids were in advanced or AP classes. And, most of the black kids were not tracked into advanced or AP classes. And so, yeah, it was a very, when you're growing up in it, you don't really know. And I certainly didn't have the vocabulary to speak to it, or maybe even the lens through which to see. I just thought, this is the way the world works. This is what's going on. And so it was only later that I was able to realize, like, oh, we were, it was, a little symbiotic system that was actually, set up like that. Um, and I will say that that's witnessing the actual, like the train tracks, the high school with two cafeterias. That's what inspired me to go to architecture school, because I wanted to actually create physical spaces where communities could come together, where we could actually build foundations for equality. In architecture, I learned, like, there's a social fabric underlying the built environment that also needs to be addressed. But that's, that was a very, like, I was like, okay, like, I don't have a place to eat lunch. That seems like a failure of, like, the architect who built the school. Like, why would we not have one cafeteria? Like, why would we not all live together? Why would we not have, like, multi-generational, multi-class, cross-racial communities? And so I think that was, like, my initial kind of, like, question going into undergrad was, how do we do this?
It's a thoughtful perspective to think about, in terms of how the architecture can affect the community. And so when you went into UVA, that was your plan, was to be in architecture?
Yeah, I went to the architecture school. That was the plan. And, I was an okay student, Jeff. I was an okay student. I think, based on what I just said too, like, I don't think I was going in with the same necessary objective as my peers, or maybe even than the professors. So I was always just, like, asking all these questions. And also there was, like, very few women in the program. And I just found it not to be the home for me. And so I ended up deciding to graduate early. So I graduated a year early, and architecture takes, like, 4 big years. And so I couldn't get the full, like, architecture certification, but I got a minor in architecture, and I did get the full urban planning, a bachelor's of urban planning. So that's what I ended up focusing on. And, it was actually more to my liking, because it was addressing the phenomena of, like, how communities actually come together versus just the built environment and, lines and dots and right angles and cutting things out of cardboard all the time.
Yeah, no, that definitely seems like an interesting perspective to take. And what was your first step into that sort of career after school?
So I would say, well, I actually did not going back to the food service component of my life. Like, I did not really strongly pursue architecture after graduation. So I had kind of made this big decision, as a 19-year-old. I was also young for my grades. So I graduated when I was 20. So I made this big decision when I was, like, 19 or 20. I was like, I'm not sure if this is the home for me. I don't know if I want to be spending this money in this place. So I think I just needed to take a beat. And it turns out I had enough credits to graduate with a bachelor's of urban planning based on the work I had done. So I decided to take that. But then I was like, I've been working in 2 different restaurants through undergrad as well. I'd served on student government, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I actually continued to work in restaurants. This is a really funny and random story, but Dave Matthews of the Dave Matthews Band was opening a sushi restaurant in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I was, like, one of the few Asian people that worked there. So I got this gig at this, like, really fancy, I think they had, like, a chef from Nobu, New York, come in and open up this restaurant. Like, it was more expensive than, like, any other restaurant in Charlottesville. And so I got to work there, and I just made, like, gobs of money, as a then, like, very, very new 21-year-old. I had this, like, degree. And so I was just, like, bartending and waitressing there. I was also working at another restaurant, and trying to figure out what was next. And I actually ended up, like, realizing I just need to leave this place. I need to leave Charlottesville, Virginia, and pretty arbitrarily chose Buenos Aires, Argentina on a map. And I, like, had saved up this money that I had earned waiting on Dave Matthews and his manager, Corin Capshaw, and, like, financed, like, what I thought was going to be a 2-month trip down to Argentina. And I actually ended up staying for 2 years and getting a job actually at a tech company, which was my first, I think, real job and real foray into, the tech world. And this was 2007.
Interesting. So you just picked up and moved to Buenos Aires.
It was like a very affordable ticket. It was a very good exchange rate at the time. I was absolutely one of those like insufferable expats, who was coming to another country. I mean, with American dollars. But yeah.
That's really incredible, and I mean, it must have been quite the shift. Quite the maybe even the culture shock to get there from coming from Virginia. What was that transition like for you, and what about it made you stick around?
Um, I remember landing there. I had like, this is before like, I think while I was in Argentina, the iPhone 1 came out and there were some Blackberries. I didn't have one and they definitely weren't supported down in Argentina. So I get there with my little like footprints guide, those little books and like, like it's like take the airport, there's like a bus, like I exchanged my money and I was really like essentially just winging it. I had like a hostel that I was going to go to, but I remember pulling up in front of the hostel, um, like stepping out on the street and being like, I love it here. I love cities. This is what I've been craving. The energy, the diversity, just everything about it, the dirt, the grittiness. I loved it. And so, that's really why I stayed. And then within, I think 2 weeks, it's kind I was, as a young person, I think I'm just learning to like not try to always be working. So I don't know. I just went out and I was like, I wonder if I should just get a job here, like, so I can maybe stay longer. So I go on Craigslist, which is how we all did things in the early aughts. And I saw an ad for like reviewing medical transcriptions, from home, and I had a computer. And so then I went on Craigslist again and I found an apartment and like just decided to like actually call VA my home base and do this kind of like gig transcription work for a while, which actually worked out really well. And I think within like a few months, I was like the head of the department and then like ended up taking more of a leadership role in that company. But yeah, I like just really found a community of people I loved. And it was my first experience outside of the American South, outside of a small city in the American South. I think Charlottesville at the time was like 40,000 people. And so moving to a city just really completely opened up my world. And I was so hungry and I couldn't leave it.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that. That would have been very exciting, and it's cool that you're able to get a sustaining job and to get your apartment. And what ultimately led you to leave after 2 years?
I think about this a lot. I was actually thinking about this recently, and I'm not sure. Um, well, I remember, not to get political, but Barack Obama was elected at the end of 2008. And I was just really excited about what I was seeing from afar. I was like, oh, I see like a lot of people coming out, coming together, across the aisle, like people really engaging in the project that is the United States of America in an active way. And I found that really compelling. And it made me also realize that, I'm having this really amazing life down here in South America. But, you know, I was like, my home and my context is the United States. And I feel like a really strong calling to not run away from it, not run away from the things I'm from, not to like run away or just critique from afar. Like if I, it's, those are my people. That's my family. It's my friends. It's my community. If I think, there needs to be a change, I need to go back and be a part of that. And so that's what I did at the very end of 2008.
Got it. Yes, it sounds like you felt this responsibility to your home, your people, and went back. And I believe you went to New York after that.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny. I took now I am going to get political. No, like I was, initially going to move to San Francisco, and I had a friend who was traveling and was going to let me the apartment super cheap, and I was going to go to San Francisco. That's actually where like the tech company I'd been based was like from, and I had some friends and community there, and I was going to go there and like see how California was. And I get there, and it's so funny because it was like almost the same type of gut feeling as when I like stepped out onto the curb in Buenos Aires. I like stepped out onto the curb in San Francisco. I was like, I remember I saw like this group of like grown men playing hacky sack, and it was like noon, and I was like, these are not my people. And I was like instantly filled with like rage and like no like and people were very passive aggressive. Now I'm just fully stereotyping, but I'm a New Yorker, so I have to do this. But like it was like I did not mesh with it just didn't feel right. So I left after 3 months, and then I was like, let me try New York. And so then I moved to New York, and I took the Chinatown bus. I was also like working in restaurants between this too, but I like saved my money, got on the Chinatown bus. I think I like might have hitchhiked to DC, took the Chinatown bus from DC to New York for like, $20 or whatever it used to be, and arrived. And I was like, in Chinatown, which the part where the bus dropped you off is actually very stereotypically Chinatown. It's like, smells like all the fresh fish, but it's, a hot day and it had been left out. And like, it was a lot, and there were people everywhere, but I was like instantly in love with this city. And so I did what I do best. I went out and I got 3 jobs that week. I got an apartment off of Craigslist again, and I started the next chapter of my life here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I know New York has a very particular energy to it, and it's such an interesting sort of blend of cultures in the U.S. So I can certainly imagine why you appreciated it. And what took you to the New York Restoration Project?
Yeah. Well, you did your research. This is something. Um, when I was thinking about this, I was looking at that, and I was working. The New York Restoration Project was, I think, a project of Bloomberg and Bette Midler. As like projects in New York are, it's just like, oh, that's like Bloomberg and Bette Midler's project, and they were trying to, green New York and plant trees and make the air, improve the air quality, improve all the things that we know that like when your block has trees, that people are happier. So I was actually an volunteer intern there. I was working at 2 restaurants, and then I was also volunteering here. And Jeff, I actually forget how I found that. It was like just one of these like life things. I was just like, I was new to New York. I was always out. I was always meeting people. And I knew like, I was just curious about it. I was like, like this is a giant, well-funded nonprofit. Let me just go see how it works. And so, but I think I spent 90% of my time putting address labels onto envelopes to donors, like thank you cards to donors. So
Well, it seems great, like great intuition to learn for the future. And I like to dig into the early roles that people chose because it's interesting. Like, despite the fact that sounds like you were working really hard in the hospitality industry, you still had sort of a calling to be part of making where you were better.
yeah, no, I mean, if you had met me when I was 23, I probably thought I was going to be like a waitress for the rest of my life. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But that's just like, I loved it. I mean, I loved working on my feet. I loved all aspects of it. Running service is like a really fun, invigorating experience. You can like leave it at the door when you leave and you pick it up when you come back. Like there's a lot of beautiful perks to it. And I thought that that's just what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So it's actually pretty surprising to me that I ended up where I am.
Yeah, and I'm curious about this next jump. You went to the Center for Racial Justice and Education, and I'm not sure, what role you started in, but I know you became the executive director. That seems like a big change. And so what brought you there?
Yeah. So this was while I was working at the New York Restoration Project. I probably just like met someone else, and they were working at the Center for Racial Justice and Education. Actually, no, I remember now. I was working at a restaurant with this woman, and her like mentor worked at the Center for Racial Justice and Education. And she was like, you should just meet Miriam Fogelson, who's amazing. So I met Miriam Fogelson, who's amazing. And she was like, we're trying, like, the organization was then called Border Crossers, and it was like founded to bring young people together across like New York City at the time. And I think still is, or might even be more, was the most segregated school system in the country. So Border Crossers was just trying to bring together kids against difference to have conversations about race and class and identity. And so this, really piqued my interest because I grew up, going between cafeteria to cafeteria, or like trying to figure out where I belonged and trying to like put language to my own racialized experience. So I was like really excited by this project. So I don't remember the moment, but I probably said, I'll just come help. And so I got pulled in, again, started as like a volunteer intern level. One of my tasks was like looking at this like evaluation by CUNY, that was, studying what was working and not working about the program. And what the evaluation found was that, it turns out when you bring two 5-year-olds from different backgrounds together, they're going to ask really, you know, the teachers describe them as tough questions, but I think they're just smart questions. Like, why does our school not have running water and their school has like Annie's organic bunnies on tap? Why
Yeah.
do they have a Mac lab and we have one computer? Or actually, like, one school we worked with, their library had been locked up because they couldn't afford a librarian. And
Wow.
so, but young people are just noticing this and trying to make meaning. And then the adults who are facilitating these activities felt really under-equipped. So this really stood out to me. And I was like, we need to develop some sort of professional development tool for these adults to navigate this program. And so I'm not sure where I got this, but I was like, I'm just going to do this. And I like pitched it up, and like everyone in the organization was like, sure, let's let Jaime-Jin, the volunteer intern, just do this thing. But I pulled together an advisory board of some, like, I called up, I was like, this was before Google, so I'm not even totally sure. It wasn't before Google, but I was like searching around and just having coffee with like all of these professors at Columbia and NYU and people who've been doing kind of like helping adults grapple with racial identity and racial just, like how to build a racially just world, like talking to them. And so we pulled together an advisory board, pulled together some, actual consultants, and put together a curriculum. And we piloted it October 29th, 2010, 2011, one of those years. But I remember it was October 29th because it snowed oddly early. It was at Columbia University. And I remember looking out the window and seeing the snow falling. And it sold out. And we like booked 4 more and they all sold out immediately. So then the organization was like, this seems like something that's like really needed. And so they were going through a leadership change in general. And so they were like, do you want to just like, do we just want to do this with the organization? And do you want to lead it? And so I was too young to know that I should have said no or asked for more money. So I said yes. And then I did that. I got to work on this project for the next 5 years and like build out the program. It became national. We partnered with schools, DOE, independent schools across New York City, New York State, and further on really helping educators who are, even in New York City, it's the workforce is 87% white women. So largely helping a white founded institution grapple with racism, and not just feel bad about it, but actually figure out actionable steps to integrate into their classrooms so that kids today or kids back then would be more likely to have equitable outcomes. So it was deeply meaningful work. I loved every minute of it, and it was very, very hard. But it was probably my first experience, like taking an idea, growing it, and trying to build something around it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was tremendously impactful in many ways. In addition to all the impact it was having in the schools and on the teachers, just in your own life, being able to sort of start something like that from scratch and see it grow into this larger than life thing, that must have, I imagine, given you some self confidence going forward that in what you're capable of.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, but also the work itself was like healing for me. Like, I got to name all of the experiences I had as a kid and like help the people in positions of power, who were the teachers and the educators and the administration, actually figure out how to not keep doing that for the next generation. So, it was while figuring out the business aspects of it, while figuring out the scaling and, everything, and how to manage my own time and how to manage a team and how to be a more public facing individual as well. But like, yeah, it was definitely like, I don't remember a lot of it because it was just like a time of like a chapter of incredible growth. So yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so you worked on that for around 5 years. And when you were done there, it was in about another 5 years or so till Wiggle Room started. What was sort of the path in between?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this brief, Jeff. I wanted to see, because like the Center for Racial Justice and Education, it was still like, when I took it over, it had a very, very small budget, and I was the only full-time staff member. So I was able to grow that, but it was still like fundraising small grants, like $5,000 to $50,000, like piecing that together. So I was just curious, like, how do these bigger projects work? I had my like toe in the New York Restoration Project, which is like a multi-million-dollar organization, and they've got to take on these really big and bold projects. So then that took me to my next job, which was being a strategist at a social impact consulting agency called Purpose. I got to work on a bunch of different projects with really great team members and with really amazing clients that were all trying to do good things in the world. So I, I loved, like, I got to run like the strategist the way, as with many agencies, like the strategist was kind of the person who like pulled together the dev team and the creative team. And like, it was fun not having to do all of that coming from the smaller nonprofit world. I would be like, okay, I'm the dev team now. I'm the creative team now. I'm the copywriter now. Like I kind of had to do all this, but this, you could really just like let amazing professionals just run with it and build really beautiful end results. So I did that. And then I feel like when you're working in consulting, one of the angles is like try to find your favorite clients and see if you can get poached. And so, it was 2015, and one of our clients was Ai-jen Poo of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. And so I really loved the work that she was doing. And I remember laying in bed one night and like, I got up, I was like, what is their plan? Like if we get a woman president in 2016, like they should be at the forefront of policy and ideas and the economic agenda. So I got up, I like looked up their 990, which is like the tax form that nonprofits filed. I went through their budget and I was like, we need to grow this organization because I think that this organization, I want to like place my bet on this organization as playing a meaningful role under our first woman president. So that night I wrote an email and waited till the morning to send it. It was probably way, way too long. And then, the team called me and I was like, I would love to work for you, basically, just like hard pitching myself, but being like, because this is like, I want you all to like be the organization. And so, and they don't need me to tell them that. And like, I'm not rich or powerful or anything. So I'm not even totally sure, but I was like, I want to help you, like whatever, I proposed some roles or whatever. So long story short, they brought me on the team. And I got to work on a very specific campaign of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. It was called Caring Across Generations. And we were focused on the economic realities of care. So elder care, child care, and long-term care for individuals with disabilities. And so I got to work on, raising money, but also like deploying these really innovative projects across the country, including like Hawaii and Maine, which are the oldest states where they're having huge caregiving crises. Metropolitan areas like LA and New York, where childcare, when parents work so much, childcare is such a strain. And so, I got to kind of like play this really amazing role. It turns out we did not get our first woman president in 2016. And so a lot of the strategy just shifted. And I realized pretty quickly that like, I'm not the girl you call to fight Donald Trump. I'm really just not. Like, I'm not the girl you call like to defend the Affordable Care Act. I will. I will fall in line with like my brothers and sisters, but like that's just not my skill set. So I ended up moving on after that. That brings us to 2018 when I actually I had been working with the Robin Hood Foundation. They do a fellowship, and they'd done the fellowship is a 4-month period every summer. I think it's actually happening right now. I think you might even actually be able to hear it in the background of this call. But they bring people from across different backgrounds, engineers, creatives, like policy people, to think about an issue. And so the issue in 2017 had been elder care. So I had been helping them with that. And then they invited me to be a fellow in 2018 where it was childcare. And that's actually where the initial seed of Wiggle Room was born.
Yeah. Very interesting. Excited to dig into that. And it sounds like in the Caring Across Generations role, you really got an in-depth look at the issues around care in general. And then going into this child care specific initiative, that sounds like it really got your wheels turning in that regard. And so, tell me how that led to Wiggle Room, and, if you could explain Wiggle Room for the audience.
So, care in this country has never worked. It's always been outsourced to women, and it's often been outsourced to women of color for free, to do for free. And I think it's important just to acknowledge that is just the very real basis of this industry. And so it's no surprise that we arrive in 2023, or when I started working on this in like 2014, 2015, and we are still largely just requiring women to do this for free. There's no structural system for both supply of care or payment of care in place. And so Caring Across Generations was looking at a pretty macro level. We were looking at actually how money was coming in and out of households. We were looking at, the fact that the average family spends more on childcare or elder care than mortgage or rent, on food, on most other expenses. That, the average cost is $19,000 a year, but it can easily balloon past that. And I don't know an American family that's like working the types of jobs that are in the labor market right now that are available that have an extra $19,000 or $30,000 sitting around post-tax. And so we were just trying to figure that out. And so I was thinking about this, and of course I'm bringing my like race and gender justice lens to it as well. Like, this is actually a way of keeping women out of the workforce, out of the paid workforce. This is actually a way of creating like a racialized caste system in the United States. And so part of, so we look at it, I was thinking about it in that deficit model, but then also thinking about like, if we actually get this right, if we actually build a system where we value care, where we value the labor of it, and where we invest in it, and it's available freely to people who need it, that's actually the society I want to live in. Like, that actually holds the answer and unlocks a lot of other possibilities, right? If we just value that, like if that were to be true. And so that's really just what got my wheels turning. So through the fellowship, I got to interview over 100 families. That's a really beautiful part of the Robin Hood Fellowship, is that they give you a lot of time and resources to pay people to be interviewed. And like, people were really generous with their stories, and I learned a lot. And everyone just told me the exact moments when their childcare was breaking down, the exact moments when they feared losing their job, the exact moments when they feared losing their home because it just wasn't working. And we were able to I was able to take kind of all of this like policy level and like academic knowledge and, see how it played out in everyday lives. And so that really was what led to the idea of the initial iteration of Wiggle Room, which was just recognizing that of all of the families we interviewed, the average, they had a breakdown in childcare every 2 weeks on average, which is wild, which tells me it's actually not emergency care. It's just a lack of a sustainable system. So we just explored what they did. We built a really quick bot. It's similar to like kind of these pod concepts that sprung up during the pandemic, but we tried to like take the challenge and the center of gravity off of these really stressful moments and diffuse them across. So can we set up a group in advance for you to text? Can we, like, in the moment, can we actually do, have pre-generated messages that you send out that have the core information? And can we make it really easy for your community and your network to get back to you, and try to streamline this process, save time, make it save time, save users time, but then also they just need more information. Like, a parent would rather hear that nobody can help them out. And so then they have the information to say, maybe I'll hire a babysitter, maybe I'll actually call out for work. Whereas it's hard to really make those high stakes decisions if you text 8 people and no one gets back to you, and then you're just in limbo even longer, and often have fewer choices the longer you wait. That was the initial idea of Wiggle Room. It was really beautiful. The magic of it wasn't the technology. The magic of it was actually reminding parents that it's not a moment of personal failure when you don't have care. You're nodding. It's actually a structural issue, and we're here to help, and it's okay to ask for help. So that's where we started. And then we got a little bit of money to do a pilot for the first part of 2020. And we all know what happened in the first part of 2020, which led to a massive pivot for us.
Okay, interesting. So in the initial idea, a parent that is participating, if they run into a major childcare issue, one morning, then they send a message via the platform.
Yep. And it was activating unpaid care. So friends, what's typically called in the childcare industry, FFN, or friends, family, and neighbor care.
Got it. And then, obviously COVID threw a wrench into things. What was your pivot?
So January, February, we're running this pilot. We're bringing parents on. We had 50 moms. We were, getting them onboarded, building out their care systems, like making sure, when they'd hit their button or they'd send out their requests, we're doing a very concierge approach. Often it would be most of it was automated, but I would still be running in the background of the database, just being making sure things were connected, or adding notes to what I knew about the parent's life or things like that, adding a human touch to that. And then I heard that San Francisco was closing down because of this thing called COVID-19. And so I just started calling all my parents, and I was like, what are you all going to do if childcare closes down, or if, you can't go to work? And I remember a parent literally told me, she goes, Jaime-Jin, why are you calling me, stressing me out all the time? I'm going to reach through the phone and punch you through the phone if you keep asking me these really stressful questions. And I was like, you're right. Let me go do something else. Let me go figure something out, and I'll stop stressing you out. And then that was March 3rd. And then, within 2 weeks, Broadway shut down, the school shut down, everything shut down here in New York. And I was, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure everyone kind of has this moment who is running some sort of business or venture during early March 2020 in New York City, or maybe February in San Francisco. But I was like, what do we do? We had all these plans. We were doing FFN, Friends, Family, Neighbor Care, which requires shuttling kids all across the city. And so I called one of my advisors, and I was like, what do I do? I I'm trying to prove out this thing by June, blah, 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 all of saying words like roadmap and MVP and proof of concept. And he's like, Jaime-Jin, this is a global pandemic. Do what your users need. He's like, I also know you. Be of use right now. You can sit in your apartment. Be of use right now. And if we all figure this out, we'll figure out what's next for Wiggle Room. And that was just such a good reminder. So I put our roadmap, I set it to the side. I put our product on the back burner, and I called up all of my users with a different tone in my voice. And I said, what do you need right now? And what are you going through? And I just collected stories, and people said, I don't know if the DOE is opening things, but I don't know if I'm eligible for a free childcare. I'm a cashier, so they said I might have to go back to work at the end of March. I work at UPS on the belt sorting mail. I might have to go back to work, a lot of fear. And so really I just affirmed their stories and started saying, writing down their questions and saying, you know what, let me make some calls, let me do some Googling, and I'll try to get back to you. And I feel like just became an extra like resource for them. And then people started giving my number to their friends and giving my number to their neighbors and being like, oh, Jaime-Jin can help you find childcare. And so I realized pretty quickly that like this was a huge undertaking. So I just called up some friends who I also knew were like not going into their work or, sitting at home. And I said, I think we need to like help parents figure out how to navigate childcare through. I was thinking it was like a 3-week project, like a 3 to 6 week project. That day I just like bought a Squarespace, I think for like $18. I called up Airtable. I asked them if I could have the pro account to try to do this for free, which they gave me. I called up a really great business texting service called TextLine. They also gave me use of their tools for free. And I duct taped together a hotline in about 4 days, trained up a team of 20 volunteers. We had like 9 different languages, not always on board, but like people would send us their questions and we'd try to find it out. I had like a research team that was constantly figuring, like the information was just changing daily. And like de Blasio was sending down news, Cuomo was sending down different news. Like, can kids go to daycare? Do kids under 2 have to wear a mask or not? Like that was like a huge thing for so long. Like there were these free centers, but if you had to go to schools.nyc.gov, you had to go to the search bar, and in English, you had to type in the words Regional Enrichment Center to find the free childcare services from the city. And so, like, I found myself not able, like, my fingers just never typed regional enrichment correctly, and I would just, like, never find it. So we just created a hub where parents could call and get information that was tailored to them. Like, a parent who has, like, 3 kids and like a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 2-year-old. What is like a holistic and realistic plan that, she can make so that she can keep her job? And so these were the things that we were like grappling with. And we were just really mapping out the typical childcare request, mapping out the like information and the order that we needed to get it in to eliminate choices so that we could give her back 1 or 2 good options. And so that's really what I did for all of 2020.
I mean, that's heroic work, honestly. Like, it's so incredibly important, and to hear how you just stepped up right away, despite all that was going on. I mean, I think it's pretty incredible.
I mean, if I had known it was going to be like 8 months, I might have been a little bit more cautious, but honestly, like I wouldn't have changed a thing. And it felt really meaningful to wake up every day and like really because the thing I'll add, the things that we learned were that like the average childcare request took 14 days to fulfill, which is wild. And this is like having a team of 20 working on it. Like we'd be like, okay, mom works in Flushing, has like, 4 kids, like has this budget, doesn't have this budget. 1 kid's in a DOE school, but 1 kid's in a charter school, and 1 kid, is doing remote schooling. But she also works nights on like every other Saturday. It was like, and so like going through and figuring out what options to give to her took a team of 20, 14 days to figure out. And so that's when that was the beginning.
I mean, most people in that mom's situation don't have a team of people trying to help them solve this, though. So, I mean, the fact that it took 14 days is, just says a lot about what we have going on in our various systems. But the fact also that this working mom had this team of people, working on her behalf, I mean, is pretty incredible.
Yeah. And I mean, shout out to the team because, we had, they were New Yorkers who just stepped up, who said, I can give 2 to 8 hours a day. And they had to be this kind of combination of like social worker, but then like I had built out, this is like before Airtable had interfaces and things like that. But like I was like, we're basically just interacting with a database, but like it had very, very precise taxonomy. So it's like, this is what this code means. This is how we enter it in. This is what will trigger this automation. So it's like, they had to be like a technician as well. So it was it was really a team effort.
And over these last 3 years or so, how has Wiggle Room evolved?
So that was the parent side experience as a hotline that really showed me, which is a place that I have not had lived experience of, like navigating such a complex childcare system with so many variables. And the other side was the supply. So I called up every agency, OCFS, ACS, HRA, DOE, all the alphabet soup people. Like, I called all of them. We had regular relationships with them to understand what options they were putting forth as a public solution. And then I also called 6,000 daycares. So there's schools and centers, which were largely closed for 2020, which makes sense. But I realized there was this modality of childcare called family childcare. That's actually the largest supply of childcare to communities of color, to all children under 3, to children who have access needs, and to kids in communities that receive a low income. This is the largest supply of childcare. This is the backbone of the childcare system. And it's largely disaggregated. It's 6,000 small businesses. Think about as many bodegas as there are, the one bodega doesn't necessarily know the next bodega, And so I just called all of them and started asking them about if they were open. Over 2/3 of family childcare programs remained open, did not close a single day through lockdown to support the families in their community. They're providing 3 hot meals. They're providing educational activities. They're providing PPE to the family, in addition to just ensuring that cashiers, delivery people, mail people, all of the people involved in the medical system that we were relying on could go to work. And when we were doing our requests for our families in the hotline, I forget the exact number, I should have looked this up, 80-something% went to family childcare. That was just the solution. There was just no other solution. And it was like an aha moment. I was like, wow. And then we pulled the research, and during the pandemic, and even before the pandemic, they were sitting 50% under attended each week. So in New York City, that's over 20,000 open seats available each week, right? And then we have parents, we're in this childcare crisis where parents, even if they have a voucher, even if they have the budget out of pocket to pay for care, they can't find a seat. And so I was like, okay, we have this supply, we have this demand, what's going on? And this was really just the initial idea for Wiggle Room. And this is what we set out to solve, which is build a product that sits in between, that can smooth the supply and the demand. Learning that that's what we wanted to do. And so we were like, why aren't the supply and demand coming together? And we realized it's because the modern workforce doesn't work 9 to 5, doesn't work. Right now, the unit of childcare that you can purchase in this country is an annual tuition, and it buys you school year care. It buys you maybe 9 to 3. And that's the unit. It's an annual, tuition to childcare. At the same time, the providers, these are small businesses run often on pen and paper. They're still very, very, very sophisticated, but they're doing things on pen and paper. So if you have 16 spots in your daycare, you can't have more than 4 or 5 families that need something non-traditional or part-time. Otherwise, you're just sitting there losing track of who's coming in. And that's they take, regulation. They're highly regulated. They're all inspected by the state. They have random inspections that come by. They have a meal program. They have to provide meals. They have to have cleaning supplies. They need to know who's in their daycare every day in advance. So they can't be crunching all these numbers all the time.
Right. And that doesn't line up well with how different each family clearly is and their needs clearly are. So it sounds like that's where you guys come in.
So that's where we come in. And so the simplest version of what we're trying to do is leverage the availability in family childcare seats, leverage them to bring access to families that need care that are currently falling through the cracks. And so we're just kind of going down our list of figuring out we have to start at the beginning, which means we can't just infuse, There are other models where we make, we just buy up daycares and they're all 1099, similar to like an Uber. They're like entrepreneurs under our flag, like, and we really control the supply. But we learned really quickly is that there are products like that out there. And the women who start these businesses are really independent and really entrepreneurial and have a really strong point of view. And in fact, thinking about my mother would never have done that. Her joy was bringing her own point of view into that classroom. She still had like standards and regulations that she would adhere to. But like if you told her what she had to teach every day and she couldn't find a more creative way to do it or like put her own spin on it or make a song into it, she wouldn't have done it. And that was actually her gift. And so these women are like, remind me of my mother every day. They're like really strong willed, but they bring such a strong perspective on, teaching as an art. And so taking that away from them would mean they would leave the industry. So we're figuring out how to like honor their individuality, but then just network the things behind the scenes that they don't need to be doing all the time.
If you're enjoying this episode, I would greatly appreciate if you could review, like, comment, or subscribe on your favorite platforms. Your engaged support goes a long way in helping the show grow and getting our impactful guests heard. Now back to the show. Yeah, it's like a delicate balance in terms of letting them thrive with what they do well, and also while also trying to fill the void in the things that are difficult. But it sounds like you're coming at it in a very practical way and really speaking to the people that are on the ground floor doing the work.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I'm most proud of, which is we have to build something that works. We have to build something that can scale. But I really strongly believe that we can do it with the end users. And in our case, it's, and I think we have a competitive advantage that we are building with, the 6,000 daycares in New York. We're going to scale nationally, but like we have a model for actually, they're not even on Google Maps. They haven't all claimed their business on Google Maps. They're not all on any platform. We have a platform they can join, but we know we have to find, the matriarch of the industry, talk to her, host these things where they get to know us. We have this model now where we can actually build trust from within a community and invite them in and like be fully transparent about what we're doing so that they have choice and agency. Because the last thing I would want to do is take away choice and agency from an already marginalized group of people that's providing such an incredible service to our society. So being really straightforward about how our business operates, how it functions, and inviting them in. And we've been wildly successful in that. So,
well, that unique sort of open and transparent point of view, I think, sounds like a big part of your sort of special sauce with Wiggle Room. It's pretty tremendous to see what you've been able to build. And, I'm curious from either side, from the parent side and from the childcare provider side, how do they individually engage with Wiggle Room?
Yep. So right now, if you're a parent, you can actually use our free search tool called carefinder.nyc if you're a parent in New York City. It's free. They can find all of the programs, they can book, they can add themselves to the wait list there. If you are a childcare provider, you can claim your business and add more pictures and photos and information to carefinder.nyc. It takes about 2 minutes. And then also when you enroll on that, you'll get an invitation to kind of the Wiggle Room community where we provide a lot of other resources, monthly meetings, events, speakers that will help you grow your business. And you also get, any parent that's interested in, booking childcare with you basically gets us as a concierge. So that's what we're working on right now for those two sides. But we believe that childcare, that many people across society benefit from childcare, and it's time to bring more people to the table other than the people most directly affected by it. So we're talking to employers as well about how to implement Wiggle Room as an employer benefit, in addition to workforce development programs and community-based organizations that serve working parents and working mothers as their primary demographic. We have, services that enable their parents to move through our system and find childcare more efficiently than if they were to do it on their own. So,
Yeah.
if you go to our website, wiggleroomnow.com, and click on the first button that says get exclusive updates, you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can make sure you're connected to the resources that we offer.
Awesome. Well, let's say that I'm a parent in New York City. Are you expecting me to go on the platforms like just randomly one day as like a way to prepare for the future? Or is it more like my babysitter is sick today? I'm coming on Wiggle Room to see how I can fix this.
This is a great question. Thank you so much for asking, because it was occurring to me that I was not clear about this. So to take a quick step back, there's a few different types of childcare. So there's we know that there's set childcare. There's schools. There's the group that we primarily work with, which is licensed family childcare programs. And then there's FFN. Childcare happens in a very different way, like you were saying. So then there's people who need consistent, everyday, Monday through Friday care, consistently consistent care, we call it. They can largely plug into this existing system. Then there's, people who are maybe gig workers or have a completely unpredictable schedule. We are not able to quite work with those families yet. This infrastructurally is just not there. We have our eye towards that. We are building towards that. We are not there yet. And that falls emergency care. If you don't fit into that first system of having consistent 9 to 5, a 9 to 5 job, you often are just, the only other option is cobbling together emergency care, right? So if you have enough money, you can hire a nanny or a babysitter and plug those holes. But if not, you have to make other arrangements. What we discovered is that there's actually a third and growing majority type of family and with this type of childcare need, which is kind of consistently inconsistent. So you might work a shift job and you might open on Monday and Thursday, but maybe you close on, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. And maybe you work a Saturday, you pick up a Saturday. And you always need, maybe 45 to 60 hours of care in New York. You always need that. But when it happens, just kind of shifts around a little bit. And that's really where we shine. So you build, a smaller community of care. We do have to do these initial matching on our platform. You build a smaller community of care. And then we can provide the week over week saying, okay, since you're opening, on Tuesday and Thursday, you're going to go to Miss Gladys. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, when you have to close, like a Starbucks, you're going to go to Miss Shanita. And then if you want to pick up a Saturday shift, we can plug you into Miss Tiffany. And these are all providers that know your kid, who knows, where you are on your potty training journey, who knows what foods your kid likes and doesn't like, who knows what you're working on. It's not, the Amazon locker of childcare, which has been pitched to me before. But it's still a small nurturing community that's an extension of what you would naturally do. And so that's how we're able to work with employers and with workforce development programs and CBOs, is to plug their parents into that type of program. So it's not emergency care. We're actually trying to build, Jeff, when I survived the pandemic, as my advisor said, we'll figure out what happens next. And I was I realized that our first tool, while it was a really, really beautiful product, and I really learned a lot, it was still just trying to stretch the Band-Aid further and further and trying to catch all these parents that were falling through the cracks and solve it with free labor. And so when I emerged and was really going through the data, in 2021 from the hotline, I was there are so many parents in this situation. We actually just need to build a sustainable product that works for them and that actually invests in this childcare industry. And that's all I want to do, is build something that's actually stabilizing. So that's what we're really trying to do, is carve out this stabilizing childcare solution for the growing majority of families that need more flexible, but still consistently need care, but just need a little bit more flexibility than is currently offered.
It's awesome that you're creating this. I mean, I have a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old, so been learning a lot about it, and it's certainly a really tough and so complicated area. That's one thing that our conversation is really stressing to me, is just similar, I think, to the changes needed in our education system, in that we need individualized education for different people. We similarly need this sort of individualized childcare setup. And it's so logistically difficult, but to see you guys building a tool to make it work is just, it's inspiring. It's exciting to think of where that could go.
Yeah. And I mean, it's when you say like everyone needs an individual tool. So it's like a universal experience. Like it's universally, it needs to be universally individualized, which is like honestly why it just takes time and resources. But I say like I could order a pizza from like 8 different places with a gluten-free crust, and it could be vegan, with a very certain type of like pepper that I want on it. I could order that because there was like a will and a way. And so like we're just trying to apply that same focus and determination to getting people the individualized childcare that they need universally.
Yeah, I'm really excited by this, like I said. And so would you say that your hope is sort of to try to get as close as you can to perfecting your product in New York, and then would you hope to scale from there, or what do you sort of envision for the future?
Yeah, we'll likely have to do, a little bit of a staggered rollout. We have, building, because childcare is going to have to happen in such a networked relationship. We are starting in specific geographies, even within New York. So we're starting actually in the two, in Morrisania in the Bronx and in Brownsville and Brooklyn, which is actually the highest concentration of childcare providers in the country. And it's also where families work shift jobs and have a huge need for dynamic childcare solutions. So what this means is there's more childcare transactions happening in these zip codes than in most other zip codes in the country. So that's really where we're focused. And we're looking at like these zip codes all across the country. And so it is a city rollout, but we're looking at like, okay, where can we start just like engaging providers and letting parents know and building simple solutions so they can at least find each other and like have visibility into their options. And then the next step is to go in and then we identify large employers, organizations, and support them to provide this more week over week product, which we're still developing. So we'll be able to roll out in somewhat of a staggered way.
Awesome. I'm excited to watch the growth and see how your journey develops from here. One thing I wanted to mention, anyone that is listening that has listened to a bunch of other episodes has heard me tout that I think business is the most powerful vehicle for change, that I don't like the differentiation between for and not for profits, because I think sustainable organizations that create positive impact should be the goal. So within that, I imagine Wiggle Room is a technically for-profit entity, but it's creating tremendous impact. So I just wanted to talk about, maybe was there a wrestling with that? Like, should we be nonprofit, in which case you'd have to be tough to get money, or should we be a sustainable for-profit business?
Yeah. That's why I took this interview when I started listening to some of your episodes and, just kind of like heard that direction of the conversation. I did wrestle with it. I had worked in nonprofit and politics before, so I had connections there. I was like, maybe I could just go out and get like, some grant money, call it a day. But when I thought about it, I didn't want to be beholden to program officers or foundations who are largely a few steps removed from the actual issue. They're very susceptible to like changing whims, reorganizing portfolios, like changing their funding priorities. And their dollars aren't designed to fuel innovation and growth in the way that I wanted to do it. And so I ultimately decided to incorporate as a public benefit corporation. So we do have a social mission alongside our financial imperative. And we get to put our end users at the center as our customers, as our payers. We get to bring new payers to the table, yes, but the product ultimately has to deliver more sustainability for a parent so that they can go to work, so that they can take career opportunities. It has to deliver value to the daycare industry. It has to make their businesses more viable. It has to make their margins make more sense. And I just love being able to focus on that. Those are my metrics rather than, reporting back to a philanthropist. And it just feels very different. And I believe it's much more sustainable for us and enables us to have even more impact than we otherwise would be able to.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. And, it's something I've talked about with people in the nonprofit world is, you know, how they need to be customer obsessed in the way that you've mentioned, and how important that is to sustainable work. And in so many nonprofits, you're not answering to the customer, like you said. So I really appreciate the way that you put that. And I think that you will have a lot of ongoing impact with Wiggle Room and beyond.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it. I get to do what my passion is every day, and I that does not escape me. And so I feel a lot of gratitude for that every day.
And I'm sure that you have customers that have tremendous gratitude as well. Uh, and I'm curious, has there been anyone in particular that's maybe come up to you and told you how impactful it's been, or just a moment where you really saw how much you were affecting someone's life?
It's so funny because I get asked this question a lot, and I have, I mean, yeah, I mean, parents, when you see them find a childcare solution that actually works, and they can, go back to their job, you know, have housing security, food security, all of the cascading impact of that, incredibly meaningful. But I actually wanted to answer your question with an example of what would typically be called a failure. So we set out in May to run a quick pilot, to test a quick, hypothesis that we had that we couldn't quite, we had this hypothesis for how to move parents through this one really tricky piece of the child care search process. And we could, we enrolled some parents and we were helping them through and learning. And Jeff, it didn't work. Like we couldn't figure it out. In the moment, we were just like sitting there, like pressing buttons, calling people, calling agencies, trying to figure it out. And I felt a massive sense of shame, honestly. I felt like I had failed these parents that I had enrolled in the pilot. And I also was like, what does this mean for the business? But well, we send out like our NPS survey every week, and we're collecting we asked some other questions to collect some more data. But parents were just like reporting that this was like amazing, and they said that they would recommend us to a friend. And I was like, this can't be true. Like next week we have to actually ask them to recommend us to a friend, or else I'm not going to believe it. And so the next week we said, like, press this button to recommend us to your friend who they can get into the program. And they all did it. And we kept getting 10 out of 10. And what I realized is that actually providing the support and the clarity on the process, not necessarily being able to deliver an outcome, was just as important. Like feeling like they weren't alone, that some of the problems were just feeling alone and feeling confused and not having language access and not being able to hold multiple siblings and all of these complexities to a childcare request, and having, and they probably do know my name and they know me, but having a system that just they felt reflected in was wildly valuable. And so this did not change lower any bars for us to deliver childcare, but it did help us really understand, oh, we need to actually the thing that we did in this pilot, this needs to be the service, And so it was just, and I literally just talked to one of those parents earlier this week, I guess on Monday, and, and she found childcare, and, she was just like, that was life changing. Just having someone listen, help me go slow, apply to things with me, for me to be able to see the process in advance and make plans accordingly was so helpful. And so, yeah, that's just kind of an epiphany that I'm sitting with right now and really holding.
Yeah. That's beautiful, and I hope you carry that with you as continued motivation in all your efforts. And I'm going to backtrack for a second because there was one question I forgot to ask that I wanted to. We talked about the business elements, the for-profit private benefit corporation, or sorry, public benefit corporation. Um, what is your business model? How do you guys get revenue?
Yeah, so we're still we're an early stage startup, so we're still testing out a few different moments of monetization for us. Um, but we are looking towards an employer benefit where employers, which we can actually extend to community colleges, workforce development, community-based organizations as well. They can enroll in Wiggle Room, and then the parents, their employees or their constituents, get a seamless childcare experience, even if they have a dynamic schedule. So that's where we're looking to monetize. The rest, childcare is a very undervalued industry, and so just Janet Yellen called it a classic case of a broken market. And so literally building a marketplace product, doing back office SaaS, things like that, those business models don't quite translate as neatly, from other industries into ours. So we're looking at really bringing in payers by adding value to this growing majority of parents that need dynamic childcare scheduling.
Yeah, that makes sense and sounds promising. Um, throughout your journey, you've mentioned some people that you looked up to, like your mom, for instance. And when you first went to Crossing Borders, I know there was someone you looked up to there. Any other impactful sort of mentors that you want to mention?
Gladys Jones is the matriarch of childcare in New York City and in the country, probably. She ran a childcare business for decades, but she has just always, she lives in Staten Island, New York, and she's just always a voice for childcare, like people who own small childcare businesses. I met her when I accidentally called her doing research for the hotline, and she's the reason why I probably have stayed with Wiggle Room this long, because it's a really hard, you always have to angle, like figuring out where to really place an intervention and if it will work. And we really are having to make something out of nothing and create something that didn't exist ever before. And she probably sends me a WhatsApp memo every day. And so she believes it's possible, and her belief has like seeped into my veins, and her belief in me means the world to me. And so, I can't do an interview without shouting out, Miss Gladys, who is just such a source of like inspiration in the big sense, but also like if I publish something on Instagram or something and she'll call and be like, you need to do better. Like she's like a source of accountability as well. And she is, I know, for like literally hundreds of people as well. So there's her. There's also just, shouting out to the kind of the communities I've been a part of, the Blue Ridge Labs here at the Robin Hood Foundation, the Camelback, the folks at Camelback Ventures, the folks at Roddenberry Fellowship, Visible Hands. I've been lucky enough to be a part of a lot of these different entrepreneurial communities, and each one of them has just really invested in me and helped me. Like I go in there and I have a very specific part of the business that I'm trying to figure out, and I'm like, this is what we're going to do. And they've all risen to the challenge of helping me iron that out so that, we can move forward faster than I would have been able to otherwise. And allow underrepresented first-time and non-technical founders like me to really still playing a meaningful role in the entrepreneur landscape, in the startup landscape. Whereas, I didn't go to HBS, so they helped me like plug those holes in a way that I wouldn't otherwise be able to. So gratitude to them as well.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you've been surrounded by some great people, Miss Gladys included, and I really appreciate you sharing that. If you'd like, you can ask me a question. A lot of people ask why I started the podcast, so I'd skip that one.
Yeah, I was just curious. What does care mean to you?
What does care mean? Like in terms of childcare, or just like what does care conjure up?
Yeah, what does care conjure up?
I think knowing that you have a safe space to go to and that you can rely on. When I just think of care in general and why it's so important to everyone, um, I also just through our conversations obviously think specifically about young kids out there and how much it makes a difference to have reliable care is just unbelievable. It can change the entire direction of someone's life, I think. And, people that I interview that, mention people like Miss Gladys, they have people like that were there for them and that, without it, who knows where they would have been, or maybe people that were on a rough path and they received some care. So, in general in life, I think being kind and considerate and compassionate are the most important things, and care is a big element of that. And it's one thing to have somebody there for you; it's another thing to have somebody caring for you with compassion. And the amount that can change a life can't be overestimated. And I think that if there are people out there that feel like they're not doing a lot because they only take care of one person or their kids, like they are doing a tremendous amount because they're absolutely changing that individual's lives and everyone else that they touch.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That was my question. I love hearing everyone's answer to that.
Yeah, thanks for asking. And um, we talked earlier a little bit about some of the things that you're proud of, but whatever it may mean to you, if it all were to end tomorrow, what are you most grateful for or most proud of?
Um, Being able to build, with the community that has trusted me and wiggle room to build these tools and services and products. Um, it's less of what we've been able to build, which I do believe is really beautiful, but it's the how for like literally letting me into their homes, letting me hold their babies. Like, this is how we've built it. And holding a baby gives me insights. Like, and so uh, I'm so grateful for that. And I'm also just really proud because there's been moments where I'm like, okay, we should just like roll this out, ship this ship this new feature. We'll call it a day. And I've been like, wait, do I actually feel, what do like, I have this kind of data. I need this other kind of data. And so I'm really proud. And I think that everything that we build is so much more effective because of that. So I'm proud of that and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, as you should be. And, the big question I ask every guest, if you could snap your fingers and fix one thing in the world, what would it be and how do you think that change would reverberate?
I know we don't have time to fully go into this, but I would change the tax code in the United States. Um, but I think almost everything comes down to tax code, and it just isn't reflective of what I believe are my values, which is care front and center. If we can't care for each other, then we don't have anything as a society or an economy. And I would snap my fingers and change tax code.
I like that answer. It's certainly needlessly complex and um, would change a lot of lives. And I like how, you mentioned care as sort of the emphasizing factor of that. I mean, I think that uh, we have the resources in our world to take care of all of our citizens. And I hope that we're on a path to understanding that we should do that it's our responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, just the thing I'll add on to that is that uh, during the when we were running that COVID hotline in New York City, I was like calling the governor's office. I'm big on the phone. Like, I'll call you. Like, called De Blasio, and the city of New York, I mean, the state of New York got 100 and I want to say $68 million from the CARES Act in March or April of 2020 for childcare in the state of New York, and we actually gave around 90 million of that back because they couldn't spend it out. They couldn't figure out where care is happening. And I realized not soon enough that it's because it's happening in these shadow economies, that it's like, you know, Miss Gladys was like, I'm going to watch this kid because I'm not putting them on the street while his mom goes. And like, maybe I'll get reimbursed by this or not, or, people were all just like spreading themselves thin, like stretching $1 to make this care happen. And so that's what I also love about being able to do what we're doing is we're technicians. Like, okay, yes, philosophically, maybe one day we'd snap our fingers and everyone would believe that we need to value care or we could change the tax code. But actually, do we have the tools to actually make care happen, to ensure kiddo A gets where they need to go into a community of loving and not stressed out adults to provide that care? And then the other adults can go where they need to go. Like, do we actually have the tools to do that? And so that's what we get to focus on. It's like, start building what we're calling the unit economics of dignified care, building tools around those unit economics, and then figuring out how to configure and align the interests of all of the stakeholders to fund it.
I like it. Well, there's certainly a lot of work to do around that, and definitely inspired at the direction that you're taking and what's to come for you. And I'm sure people that are listening are wondering, how can we best support you and your impact?
Yeah, go to wiggleroomnow.com, sign up to get our updates. Let us know a little bit about you, and we'd love to build with you. If you have, any ideas on anything I've said, we're going to be, hiring, growing our team, expanding across the country. We love hearing from people about what caregiving looks like in their communities and how we can support.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time with me today. I'm excited to get your story out there to everyone, and I look forward to continuing our conversation in the future.
Thanks so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with friends, and reviews or subscriptions on your favorite platforms go a long way to help the show grow. I want to share these incredible people and their remarkable work with as many others as possible. Thanks for your support. For more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.